Hello and welcome to the Wire Talks. I'm Siddharth Bhatia. In the last few days, tens of thousands of Marathas marched into Mumbai demanding that they be given reservations and their caste status changed. Their leader Manoj Jarange went on a hunger strike saying that he would not budge till the demands were met. Originally, they were given permission to protest on one day, but eventually they stuck around in the city for 5 days, throwing Mumbai into chaos. Schools and offices were shut, and there were huge traffic jams everywhere continuously. Mumbai citizens protested. The state government itself was trying to find a solution that would be acceptable not just to the Marathas, but in general also politically. Eventually, they left following a strict court order and the government's acceptance of 6 of the 8 demands of theirs. But now other caste groups are unhappy. What exactly were their demands, and what is the social and historic background of this agitation? What exactly were their demands, and what is the social and historical background of this agitation? And will there be political repercussions eventually? Sumeet Mhaskar is a professor of sociology at the Jindal School of Government and Public Policy, O P Jindal Global University. He earned his doctorate in sociology from the University of Oxford after MA and MPhil degrees in political science from Jawaharlal Nehru University. He has received fellowships from universities around the world. Mhaskar has researched and written extensively on the workers' responses to the closure of textile mills in Mumbai and how this has influenced changes in the working class districts of the city. He has also written extensively on the Marathas, and he joins me today to help us understand the reason for this agitation. Sumeet Mhaskar, welcome to the Wire Talks.
Thank you, Siddharth.
Could you first start by giving us some context on what the main issues are all about?
Yeah, sure. So as far as the Marathas are concerned, they have been demanding reservation in public employment and higher educational opportunities since the mid-90s or late 90s. But as far as its agitational avatar is concerned, it only began taking shape in 2012, 2014. And it is only in 2015 or 16 we see the mass mobilization of the Marathas on the question of employment and higher education. So their demand is that that as far as their own situation is concerned, that several Marathas are poor and they are unable to access public sector jobs as well as higher educational reservation facilities. And this is the background to the demands since pretty much since mid-90s, but which has been intensified in the last 10 years.
Education, higher education is the key part here, isn't it? Because there are not too many jobs going around, government jobs. And even if there are, they are distributed among a lot of sectors. So it is education. It boils down to higher education, isn't it?
It is both, I must say. In fact, more than the higher education, I would give more weightage to the jobs. Because if we look historically, especially in the Western India, the Marathas are also the dominant castes, which means that they have a numerical strength. They are otherwise lower in social status compared to the Brahmins or other castes. But they have a big number and they have managed to corner a larger share of well-paid jobs, both in public sector as well as in the private sector. And if we look at the trajectory of our well-paid jobs, which means that individuals with little or no education had access to these jobs, which are permanent in nature, and they come with all kinds of social security provisions. Now, these jobs were merely 8 to 9% in 1950. And today it has come down to 2 or 3% maximum, together with public and private. Now, if we look at the industrial job, the manufacturing jobs, which is the major chunk where the Marathas were pretty much located, that has pretty much disappeared from cities like Mumbai, Pune, or any other cities. Mumbai provided the maximum number of the well-paid jobs.
In
And it is
textiles.
textile mills, Seat tire factory, Voltas, Padmini automobiles. So all kind of organized factories which provided permanent employment. That has disappeared. While it has affected communities and caste across, Marathas, since they were cornering the larger share of jobs, sometimes 40 to 50% of these jobs, it is very much obvious that they were, as a particular caste, they were affected the most, or at least this is what their sense of loss is. And therefore, I think education comes a little bit later because it is part of the growing aspiration among all castes and communities. In the last 20 years, what we see is that across caste and classes, there is a growing aspiration in terms of obtaining higher education. And I think this is where also there is a contradiction happening, that the last 20 years has also seen the privatization of higher education, where the share of government institutes in medical and engineering and other professional courses has reduced. And therefore, it is in this particular arena, the Marathas also feel that they are unable to get into those very little kind of position in the higher education as well. So these two combined have actually resulted in this particular kind of agitation.
Can you give a sense of overall number of Marathas? And is it correct to say that there are various kinds of Marathas? And were they all together in this agitation?
As far as Marathas are concerned, there is a kind of roughly, one can say 25%
Of the state?
Of the entire state population. And the significant part of Marathas is that of the various dominant castes across the country, such as the Jats in Haryana or Patidars in Gujarat, or you have the Kammas and Reddys in Andhra and Telangana, or Kapu community. In terms of number, Marathas are the biggest, as a 25%. Some claim that the number goes to 30%, but with all the kind of variations, even if we stick to 25, that is still the largest. Now, within Marathas, as you said, there are variations for sure. There are variations in terms of the Marathas from Western Maharashtra, Konkan region. Western Maharashtra is where predominantly Marathas are located. They are pretty much a minority when it comes to Konkan region and the Vidarbha region. And you have a decent notable presence of Marathas in the Marathwada region. Now, within Marathas, there are different kind of distinctions. There are certain kind of distinctions of the 96 clan families, which trace their lineage to the military kind of activities during the 17th and 18th century. But across these variations within Marathas, what is more important is to look at the classification based on their also economic status and their access to political power. So on that basis, if we look, those who are at the bottom of the ladder, those who we can say have marginal farmers within the Maratha community or small landholders, or those who are lower middle class or poor Marathas in urban and rural locations, they are the ones which have been the force behind reservations. But in the current form, the kind of agitation they are doing, it also has taken political turn. Because those with political aspirations also tend to benefit if Marathas are included in the other backward caste category.
You mentioned that they are powerful groups. It's been my impression, and it's been general impression whenever I have spoken to observers and scholars and all that. The Marathas are very, very powerful as far as Maharashtra is concerned. They control the state's politics. They control the sugar mills of Western Maharashtra. Why do they still need reservations?
Yeah, in my research, what I have come to the conclusion is that the demand for reservation is a product of two kind of crises. One is the urban crisis and second is the rural crisis. As far as the urban crisis is concerned, I had mentioned earlier that it has to do with the disappearance of well-paid jobs in the manufacturing industries. This is especially true in relation to those individuals with little or no education or even vernacular education. So those jobs have disappeared. Secondly, there is a massive contractualization of public jobs. So if you look at schools, colleges, everywhere there is a contractualization. Okay, so which means that even those who have a decent amount of education or with university degrees but vernacular degrees, even they don't have access to better paid jobs. So that's part of the urban crisis, that overall, as far as the employment opportunities are concerned, especially for rural labor migrants, they have disappeared completely. Now, linked to the urban crisis is the rural crisis. Now, what is rural crisis? First is that now the rural youths have no avenue to come to the urban areas and support the rural livelihood. Historically speaking, those rural migrants who came to cities like Mumbai would send money back home so that agriculture activities could be carried out. That possibility is absolutely disappeared. Second, there is a division of land within the households, which means that even the smaller portion of land does not allow the individuals in rural areas to carry out their livelihood. The third part of the rural crisis is that even these youths themselves who now go to city like Mumbai, they have continued to go to different urban areas. Now they are part of what is famously known as the informal sector, which means this is a sector where the wages are extremely low, the working conditions are abysmal, and you have to work more than 12 hours, and there is no social security provision. And these are the rural youths who are unable to provide any kind of financial support in the rural areas. And the last part of the rural crisis is the disturbance of the caste hierarchy. Now, what has happened in the rural setting, while Maratha still have the highest dominant status within the village socio-economic and political setting, but some kind of mobility has also taken place among the other backward castes in different regions, depending on which region we go. At the same time, there is also mobility in one or two households within the scheduled caste community in each village. And this particular kind of changes, the Marathas see that as something which is subverting the caste relations within the rural socio-economic structure.
So, one second, sorry to interrupt you here. Does that mean that they feel that their status is slowly being diluted?
Yeah. So that's my conclusion, that these two crises has resulted in what I call the crisis of dominance. That as a dominant caste, your dominance, of course, you're socially dominant and you're socially superior. At the same time, it required material basis for reproducing that dominance. And now they don't see any way out to reproduce that material dominance. And now the way out for this crisis, the Marathas see, is reservation in employment and education, especially public sector, because that's where the only reservation can be applicable.
How will reservations actually help? Let's take a small kind of illustration. Let's say that there are X number of jobs in the public sector, including public sector companies, which are also slowly getting semi-privatized in a sense, because they're also driven by profits. Government jobs are becoming less and less. If there are so few jobs emerging, government jobs emerging, and there are so many different claimants in that, even in that reservation this segment, how will these jobs be obtainable, and how will they really help to the Marathas? What do the Marathas think? How will it help them?
I don't think they have, explored this particular aspect in a very deep manner. From whatever we see from the protesters, I don't think they are looking at the political economy in terms of what exactly they will achieve even after they achieve reservation. So even if we leave the legal part for now, whether the reservation will be applicable or not, the practical situation right now is that the government jobs are hardly 2% or 2.5% of the total jobs. So which means of the 100 jobs in the country, you only have 2 to 3 jobs in the government sector. And of the 2 to 3% jobs, let's say there are 1 or 2% jobs in the class 3 and 4 employment. But if you look at the government policies since the 1990s, right now, more than 50% of class 3 and class 4 positions are on contractual basis, which means they are not permanently hired. And again, they don't have access to the social security provisions. Now, the Marathas, if you look at their numbers in the government sector right now, of the 100 jobs, already they are occupying 50% jobs in class A, B, C, and D in the Mantralaya, which is the state secretariat, and also in other government sector. So technically speaking, the figures don't really support their demand. So even if the Marathas were to be given 10 or 20%, the problem is not going to be solved, because reservation was never meant as a policy for economic kind of problems like poverty. It's not a poverty alleviation program. And that's why this problem will not be resolved by granting reservation to the Marathas. So whichever way we look at. Okay, so therefore the numbers in terms of jobs are extremely limited for any group for that matter. And for Marathas, definitely it is not going to solve the problem, because let's say, even if I take the case study of the Bombay textile mills, which I studied very closely, by 2006, nearly 90,000 to 1 lakh workers lost their jobs. Of them, 35% to 40% were Marathas, which means nearly 40,000. So even if we take 40,000 as a number and their children claiming for jobs, and if we take other industries of Mumbai into account, then we have nearly 100,000 Maratha youths who are waiting for jobs. This is the absolute, like the minimum. And right now, the total government jobs that are available with the government of Maharashtra, or all of whatever jobs, is merely 6,000. So even if you grant 100% reservation to Marathas, that is definitely not going to solve the problem. And that is the other part here. So I think Maratha for reservation is not going to solve their problem. And as far as their own crises are concerned, in my own understanding, it is deeply rooted in the transformation of political economy. And unless and until they really take this into account, that if they stop the government from putting the jobs on the, what is it called? Sorry, contractual basis. So as long as the contractualization is not stopped, their crisis is not going to be resolved. And same with higher education, unless the state, the government expands the scope of public institutions, higher educational institutions in medical engineering colleges, this crisis of Marathas is also not going to be resolved for that matter.
And this directly hits the youth, doesn't it? Because they are coming to the job market by the, let's say, hundreds and thousands on almost an annual basis.
Yes, very much.
So is it more a kind of a psychological status?
No, I mean, if you look, as I said, it is a problem, but the problem is not peculiar to the Maratha caste. Everybody is hit by the transformation in the political economy. All caste groups are hit. So therefore, we cannot say that Marathas' problem is peculiar. In fact, if you look at the statistics from the Indian Human Development Survey, which we have calculated, of the total poor, the proportion of Maratha poor is much lower than any other group in the state. If you look at the OBCs, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and in some cases, even some of the upper castes. So the proportion of Maratha is much lower than all other groups. So even that is not a criteria. But yes, in terms of absolute numbers, they can be compared with all other groups. But as a community, they are not in this position because of any kind of social backwardness or social discrimination or historical discrimination that they are facing.
It's a peculiar situation when you think about it, of a fairly high social status, but not coping with all kinds of churning that is happening at the rural and the urban level. Now, tell me, you mentioned, and I was going to bring it up, that till 2010, 12, 14, we did not see agitations of this kind. We saw demands, but we did not see agitations of this kind. I was going to, in fact, my question was originally was that I remember the 80s, 90s when the
Mhm.
textile mills started shutting, and
Mhm.
textile mills were a immensely high source of employment for Marathas
Yeah.
for generations, not one. The father
Yes.
retired and the son joined. Uh, why did suddenly take on this kind of avatar of becoming, uh, kind of agitationist? Why? When did that happen, and why? What were the factors that were playing into it?
Yeah, I mean, see, as far as the Marathas are concerned, even after the 82-83 strike, there was already a diversion to other industries, such as the police constables. They got employed in those sector. Then there is municipal corporation. Then there is the BEST hospital. So all kinds of sectors they got accommodated. But in the last 2 decades, what we see is that at each and every level, particularly class 3 and 4, governments, whether it's a municipal corporation, state government, or the union government, all of them have strictly followed the policy of hiring people on contractual basis, no permanent employment. And that actually gradually was simmering in the in 1990s 2000s. As I said, factories began closing down late 90s and 2000s. So once they got their compensation, the frustration was beginning to grow in the late 2000s. And therefore what we see, the avatar is a product of that. So already demands were beginning, but still they were accommodated. But government from late 90s began massively recruiting only on contractual basis, and that is a major problem right now. 50% of class 3 and 4 are on contractual basis, and that is a big number. And therefore they are unable to accommodate, because if you look at the statistics, Marathas are very well in a position to exploit the general category, open category positions. It's not that if you look at the open category, the Marathas have less number. On the contrary, if you look at the state secretariat, more than 50% in each and every category, A, B, C, D. So at all levels, they have really good proportion.
Without
And yet,
reservation.
without
Without
reservation.
reservation.
Yes, without any reservation, which essentially means that as a community, you are able to gain access to resources by competing in the open kind of positions. But that is not enough, because the crisis is real. But that is crisis not restricted exclusively to Marathas. They are of course the sense of having access to better paid jobs is definitely going now. It's not entitled anymore, and therefore the problem is here to stay. No matter how many agitations they do, unless the state takes a major shift in political economy, this crisis is here to stay.
But if you've got access to the better paying jobs, even without reservations, then what is the need for this? I mean, then it's kind of, it doesn't hold up, no? This
Yeah,
argument.
that's what the Supreme Court has been saying. But the problem, as I said, like basic calculations, the demand is so big in terms of from the people, that even the government sector cannot really accommodate all of them. And therefore, there is a major problem. The agrarian crisis is also adding to all these kind of challenges. But also here, I must highlight one thing, that in the last 15 years, also in general among the upper caste, there is a sense of being abandoned by the state. And that's why we have the economically weaker section reservations, which is actually a very interesting case in itself, because Marathas are eligible for economically weaker section reservation.
And
And of the
getting good benefits.
definitely they are getting more than 5% of the total 10% reservation in the state. And so that's why it's very curious that as a community, as a one particular caste, you are actually gaining more than 5% within the EWS, and yet that demand still remains. So that opens up a lot of questions. In a sense, like, what exactly is the source? Because as I said, the reservation, somehow the debate has been constantly going into the economic deprivation, and that is not the case. It was never meant to resolve the economic deprivation of individuals, and
Tell
somehow
me,
everybody is shifting towards that.
yeah, tell me, Can you give us a background of Manoj Jarange? Where has he emerged from, and how has he convinced? How has he come up with this argument, despite the Supreme Court pointing out the facts of the case, and despite the facts of the case being what they are? Where has he emerged from, and how does he counter argue this?
See, Manoj Jarange comes from the Marathwada region, and Marathwada region is also the drought-prone region. So, in contrast to the Western Maharashtra region, which has all the major resources of the state from post-independence period, Marathwada region lacks that. And therefore, the intensity of the problem is also far more acute in Marathwada regions. And that is the region Manoj Jarange represents. So initially, this was about economic deprivation, and they wanted to have reservations. But if you look at the history of Maratha reservation or even Maratha community, from 1950s onwards, three national governments commissions have rejected their demand to be included in the other backward class list. Three state government commissions have rejected Maratha demand to be part of the other backward caste list. Until 2008, the Bapat Commission also rejected Maratha caste demand to be part of the OBC, the other backward class list, which simply meant that the Marathas were unable to present their case as a socially and educationally backward community. They are not a socially backward community, and they are also not educationally backward compared to the rest of the communities. And because they constantly failed this test of proving that they are also socially backward, that their demand was constantly rejected. And because of this political pressure, you only have the Gaikwad Commission set up somewhere in 2013-14. So that commission actually, for the first time in history, prepares a report, and they establish the fact that yes, Marathas are socially backward. But that Supreme Court rejects completely.
No, but with so many commissions already appointed, why was there a demand or political pressure to appoint another one?
Yeah, because already if the commissions have rejected, then what happens after Bapat Commission? The political pressure is growing from the Maratha side. Okay, so then the Rane committee is formed, and they begin to grant reservation, and that is again challenged in the court of law. So each reservation is challenged in the court of law, saying that they are not socially backward community, socially and educationally. Now, to prove that they are socially and educationally backward, you need a backward class commission report, and that's why the Gaikwad Commission was constituted by the Maharashtra government, whose entire purpose was to see whether they are backward or not. But it is a controversial committee. The report is itself controversial, and therefore the Supreme Court argued that it does not really match with the earlier kind of findings, and therefore this community cannot be treated as socially backward, socially and educationally backward, and therefore it cannot be granted reservation on its own as a separate reservation. And secondly, this group cannot be part of the other backward class groups. So this has been the consistent position also of the Supreme Court. Now, after that rejection, there is another survey which was done by the government of Maharashtra, where they somehow showed that again Marathas are backward. So there has been consistent kind of commissions, or at least the committees, which the government is under pressure to somehow show that the Marathas are socially backward in order for this reservation to be given. Because if you only look at economically backward reservation, it's already there. So there is no need to have a separate reservation.
No, I was asking where has he's come from, Marathwada, which is a drought-prone region. But how has he emerged? How has he emerged? Also, with all this background, despite the political pressure, surely he is aware of all this.
No, I mean, also there are political forces. Once the issue had gained, I mean, we already discussed that in mid-90s, the issue was already simmering. But by the time Jarange emerged on the scene, it had already, a consensus had emerged among the Marathas, particularly among the poor Marathas or those with marginal land holding, that reservation is a way out. And since he was the only person who was, taking a very hard line on reservation, it actually grew more kind of support for him, and also various kind of forces really supported him. And elections after elections, everybody realized the potential of this mobilization, and therefore it is, not surprising that this agitation may have some kind of political currents which are not very much visible.
Yeah, well, in fact, that leads me directly to the my next question. That there is been speculation, of course, that this current agitation has a political dimension, as
Mhm.
you yourself has just said, and to put it in kind of political gossip terms, that there is a plan either to rattle or to even unseat Mr. Devendra Fadnavis, and there are
Mhm.
people within the his own Mahayuti
Mhm.
who are joined hands with people across the opposition into the opposition camp to somehow unsettle him. Is that
Mhm.
without going into this bazaar speculation,
Mhm.
is that one kind of possibility that there are those dimensions also emerging?
I mean, there is, if you look at the history of Maharashtra since 1960, you predominantly have Marathas as chief ministers.
Correct.
And unless the chief minister is controlled by a Maratha lobby, uh, especially Brahmin chief ministers had to step down. Manoj Joshi had to step down after 2.5, 3 years. In that sense, Fadnavis, was has been actually chief minister in the first term for 5 years, and this second term, things are constantly moving up and down for him. So therefore, there is of course an anti-Brahmin sentiment as well, which goes back to the non-Brahmin movement. Within the non-Brahmin movement, the Marathas represented what we understand as the anti-Brahmin sentiment. So they were not necessarily against the restructuring of caste relations, but they merely wanted to replace the Brahmin hegemony, and that remains very much a strong current even today. So if you look at all the social media, Fadnavis is constantly trolled by being called as, some Anaji Panth or something, which is linking to the Peshwas regime. So that kind of sentiment is obviously visible. So the anti-Brahmin sentiment remains. So I'm not surprised if somebody says that. But beyond that, he's also man from the Vidarbha region, that we have to understand. And power has always been concentrated in the Western Maharashtra region, or to a certain extent in the Marathwada region. So that does create imbalances, and it is not surprising that they are using this particular kind of his caste background, that is the Brahmin background, to remove him so that a Maratha could become a chief minister.
No, in fact, even not at the highest political level, but even at the social level, there is a kind of anti-Brahmin sentiment which has permeated for the last, I would say, even 150 years,
Mhm.
to which cuts across all kinds of social sectors,
Mhm.
and that I think Fadnavis is complete. He's a Brahmin who's been put in charge of a state where the sentiment is generally anti-Brahmin. So sure, it's not just the political thing. I think a lot of other people might be happy to see him go, for example.
Not necessarily. That's what I'm saying. So it's as I said, within the non-Brahmin, there are three strands. One is led by the Marathas, the other by what we know as the other backward classes or castes, and third by the Dalits. So as far as Maratha is concerned, they have represented the anti-Brahmin strand throughout the history. The OBCs have largely taken, at least till early 20th century, a very anti-caste position of the changing of the caste order in terms of its relationships, in terms of the hierarchy. And the Dalits have consistently taken a position of the annihilation of caste kind of position. So these are three different positions. And anti-Brahmin sentiment is largely restricted to that. But yeah, but overall, I don't think that Fadnavis will have more problems, let's say, with the OBCs. The OBCs rather would prefer to go with Fadnavis than with the Maratha chief minister,
Oh, that's
because they have to,
interesting.
yeah, and also, so therefore, it's not that. sharp in terms of having that anti-Brahmin sentiment, means others will also go with that. So things have changed.
Which OBC reminds me, brings me to my next point, and that is that the moment this thing has been announced, the OBCs have reacted to say that they are angry at what has happened because they don't want the Marathas to be included among the other backward castes
Yes.
or any such thing. What do you think are going to be the future currents on that? Will the OBCs now react and protest?
Yeah, they will certainly react because the consciousness among OBCs has grown tremendously in the last 2 decades. It was not there before. Even when the OBC reservation was announced, the OBCs themselves were not really politicized about these rights that, or whatever facilities that were granted to them. But right now, the OBCs are very much politically aware, and they don't have any other choice but to oppose this. Because if Marathas, through whatever means, if they are included in the OBC list, the entire entire OBC politics is threatened, because Marathas are socially superior. They have various kind of resources, economic resources, also political resources, and they will pretty much take over all the positions which OBCs right now have gained. Like they will also go and contest elections on the OBC seats. And this is the major fear, especially for the urban and rural local bodies. All the municipal corporation elections, or the rural local bodies, where there is reservation for the OBCs, the Marathas will contest on those seats, and OBCs will pretty much have no chance in the political sphere. And same will happen also with jobs as well as educational opportunities. So the fear of OBCs is absolutely real. And definitely, I see that the OBCs will also go to the court of law, as well as they will go take this matter to the streets.
Yeah, so that means this is not really ended.
No,
But then it leads to the logical question. Firstly, what has the Maharashtra government agreed to? 6 out of 8. What are they? And secondly, what pressured the chief minister in agreeing to the demands of Manoj Jarange to end this strike? What motivated him? Is it just the agitation, or is it some other large political calculation? And if this is so, what has he agreed to?
First of all, the context is very important, because the state is supposed to announce the elections to municipal corporations across the state very soon, as well as to the rural local bodies. So this will definitely, this would have definitely affected if the Chief Minister Fadnavis would not have reacted in a way the protesters wanted them to. So the context is absolutely clear. Now, what the government has done, essentially, it has taken two paths. One is that they said, okay, we agree that the information in the gazetteer, whatever the Kunbis or Marathas, is more or less same, that will be applicable, and so that the Marathas can go and acquire caste certificates. Okay, but at the same time, what the government resolution says, that a committee has been established, and they will take some time until December to look into particularly the gazettes of Satara and one more region, so that to see whether the Kunbi Maratha thing can be resolved also by looking at that gazette information. So right now what they have found is some information in the Hyderabad gazette. Okay. Now what they want to do, if they want to really do across the state, then they need similar information from the formerly princely states in Satara and other regions. So right now what has happened is only the Marathwada region people can have access to that kind of facility of reservation, particularly through the Kunbi certificates. Again, that will be challenged. So it goes without saying that this is just a government resolution, and any form of kind of reservation or caste recognition is done by Backward Class Commission. A mere resolution cannot actually do that. And this will be easily challenged. So therefore, the government clearly accepted to the exact demands what they had asked, but they have also taken their own time to make sure that there are new committees established, and which will take time till December, which means by then all the elections would have been over, particularly the municipal corporations and the rural local bodies.
So it has played for time.
For very much, yeah.
This whole topic, this whole issue is far from settled.
Very much, because see, I mean, this is one thing I want to highlight here, is that there is a confusion between the Marathas and the Kunbis here. Now, the Kunbis are essentially a category of peasants. It's a peasant category. And if we look at the different periods, so 17th and 18th century, pretty much the Kunbi category was used for the peasants, and some of them would go also be part of the military. But it was a kind of very much a porous category. So the Maratha people would claim Maratha status, but that was pretty much porous in terms of Kunbi and Maratha. It also remained porous even in the late 19th century. Only with early 20th century, we begin to see a sharp distinction between the Marathas. So there is a strong relation historically. There is absolutely no doubt. And people will find all kinds of information if we go back historically 200 years ago. But what is more important is that the Maratha as a group, they definitely defined their boundaries by 1940s. That as a group, the distinction emerged in 1940s and 50s, and they had closed their doors for the Kunbis. And that is precisely the reason that Kunbi as a category was included in the OBC list, because as a group, it was able to establish that they are socially and educationally backward, and Marathas were not. So even though they have a kind of porous history of border moving between these two lines, some Kunbis, I mean, there is a popular saying that in Marathi, that Kunbi Mazla, Maratha Zala, which means when a Kunbi is more prosperous, he becomes a Maratha. And the Kunbis have transformed themselves into Marathas. They have claimed higher social status. And in fact, let me clarify one more point, that whether it's Kunbi or Maratha, in the caste hierarchy, they had a Shudra social status. But it is through the political transformation in the late 19th and 20th century that the group within the Kunbis managed to actually acquire a superior Kshatriya status for themselves. And Shahu Maharaj's Vedokta controversy is one of the turning point for that. And therefore, I think one may find information on Kunbi in different records, but it's not about current period, because being a Maratha does not mean you're socially backward. It actually means you're extremely socially superior, and they have managed to retain their socially superior position without even resources.
In sum, I would say what you're saying is that socially they are strong. Economically too, they are not particularly weak, as various commissions have found and the courts have said. But it is this social and political economy, changing political economy as well as changing society at the ground level, which is giving them a feeling of restlessness and loss, that land holdings are becoming smaller. The urban political economy is no longer what it was. So the youth is feeling, and there are very few jobs to be held. For example, I'm just saying, suppose there was the reservations in the private sector, suppose there was, it would have been a different game. Then at least you're claiming for something which is, unending. Here there are jobs becoming less and less. So it is a question of the youth not being able to cope with these realities. Is that so?
Partly, yes, but see, the reservation in private sector, one has to remember, we have to make a distinction between jobs and well-paid jobs with social security benefits.
Yes.
Okay. Historically speaking, from 1950s onwards, 92% of our population has worked in less paid jobs, or what is the informal sector jobs. And right now, the figure has gone to 96%. So of the total 100 people, 95 people are working in what is known as the informal sector, where the wages are extremely low and there is no social security benefit whatsoever.
In
So
any
even with
case.
reservation in private sector, things won't change for them.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. It is a conundrum, no doubt.
Yeah.
And just tell me one last thing.
Mhm.
Is there a growing sense of entrepreneurial spirit among Maratha youth?
Among the Maratha community, historically, they have always been entrepreneurial. But within the Marathas, you have at least two bigger groups which actually control the political economy of the state, especially in the rural areas, but also in the urban areas. So you mentioned sugarcane, but that goes back to the post-independence era. Now you have the vineyards, the Sula wine. That's just one example. Then you have different kinds of agro products. And now you have the real estate development. And the real estate is something, especially Pune city and different urban areas, where the Marathas have phenomenal control. And therefore, as an entrepreneur, they definitely have enough capital to come into the market. But again, there are limits because there is also the historical trading castes and communities. You have the Jains, you have the Banyas, you have the Marwadis, whom they have to compete with. But overall, they very much have a good control over various entrepreneurship in the state.
So one might argue, Sumit, with what you have said is it's difficult to pin down the problem.
Partly yes, but I think, as I said, the decline of well-paid jobs is probably where we can actually pin down, and as well as the decline of state in the educational sector. Because as long as these sectors, so government jobs as well as the government share in higher education, since both are shrinking, and this is what the protesters are not really talking about. If the protesters were to talk about the declining share of government protected permanent jobs, probably the situation would be different. And same thing if they were to demand, uh, the expansion of government-led medical colleges as well as engineering colleges. I think much of the problem would be still resolved, but that I don't see happening in the near future.
Well, it's a complicated issue, I must say, very complex. But you are right in that the framing of the entire problem by the agitators and
Mhm.
their leaders do not give this impression. What it does give is a straightforward demand for reservations, and that that has many other dimensions attached to it. The word reservations have many other dimensions attached to it. So
No,
they have
but
not.
just
Sorry.
one small thing, Siddharth, before we finish, is that it also is very helpful for the ruling political elites, that they don't really have to address the problem of increasing public
Correct.
employment or
I,
increasing the government share in higher education, because they can
com-
still play around with this reservation thing and not do much about changing the overall structures.
I was coming to that. That it works both ways. That they
Yeah,
have not given this much thought, or at least framed their demand in that context, which
yeah,
suits the ruling class completely, because
yeah.
then they don't have to address this critical aspect, that they have to increase government colleges, they have to increase do away with contractual jobs. So it suits both,
In
and it
fact,
boils down to that one word.
in fact, I mean, it's very ironical that the majority of the engineering and medical colleges in the state are controlled by the Marathas. And this, it just adds to the irony further. And
There are
therefore, the more we dig deeper into this, we just go deeper and there is no way out in some way.
Yes, well, that really, it's, as I said, it's a complex issue, very difficult to pin down. But sometimes just one word or one phrase is, becomes a catchphrase of the entire
Yeah.
argument. Thank you so much, Sumit, for explaining this to us in somewhat simple, Yet it requires a lot of thinking because the question of political economy comes in here. Thank you for explaining this to us and to our listeners. That was Sumeet Mhaskar, professor of sociology at Jindal University, explaining to us what the agitation of the Marathas in the last few days in Mumbai and elsewhere was all about. We'll be back soon with another guest. Till then, from me, Siddharth Bhatia, and the rest of the Wire Talks team, goodbye.